Welcome to Smart Investing. People call it a circular loop. OpenAI signs multi-year compute deal with NVIDIA and AMD, expand capacity on Microsoft Azure, and extend into Oracle clouds. And everyone seems to fund everyone else. Sounds like .com vendor financing, right? Not quite. Here is the reality. OpenAI primary cloud is Microsoft Azure. That partnership is multi-year, multi-billion, with Azure as OpenAI exclusive cloud providers. Microsoft also designed its own MIA AI chip for Azure, so the loop includes real capacity, not just optic. To add capacity, OpenAI extends Azure via Oracle Cloud Computing, a formal three-party move to scale compute, not channel stuffing. On hardware, OpenAI now has two giant tracks. A 10 gigawatt strategic partnership with NVIDIA, LOE with stage funding tied to deployed system, and a 6 gigawatt multi-generational deal with AMD, including milestone-based warrants that align incentives with real deliveries. That's not a shell game. It's capacity financed by Milestone. AMD, for its part, has been co-presenting with OpenAI and Microsoft on Instinct GPU deployment and roadmap alignment, again, concrete ecosystem build-out. Stay to the end. I will map the full flow of cash, compute, and revenue. Show where the circular criticism misses key difference from 2000. And rank who actually wins and who's taking the biggest execution risk across OpenAI, Microsoft, NVIDIA, AMD, and Oracle. Once you see the contract triggers and capacity milestone, the loop stops looking like a scam and start looking like a capital incentive AI supply chain. So stay tuned, let's get it right into it. So yes, and that circular web of partnership is both fascinating and confusing because it blurs the traditional supplier and customer line in the AI economy. Let's unpack why OpenAI is doing all these deals and what it signals and why it's also so puzzling to also strategically brilliant. So it's not a scam at all, like a lot of people are suggesting. It's just brilliant strategic thinking. And let's unpack what is the strategy behind all these circular deals that we are seeing right now with OpenAI and why it's only OpenAI doing this type of deals, with all the suppliers. So first of all, the circular nature. OpenAI buys GPU from NVIDIA and soon from AMD. We have seen the deal just being inked 2 days ago. So basically, it rents also compute from Microsoft Azure and now Oracle Clouds. It builds its own supercluster, but then licenses the same technology back to those partners. Meanwhile, each of those partners invests in or resells OpenAI model like ChatGPT 4, 5, etc. to enterprise customer, feeding revenue back to OpenAI. So capital, data, and compute are looping while inside the same small ecosystem. So money and technology flows in cycle. So this is going like this. OpenAI partner with NVIDIA, AMD, and Oracle. So the money goes to Microsoft. The money goes back to OpenAI, and OpenAI go to end users and back to hyperscalers. Why it is intentional? This isn't inefficiency at all. It is risk diversification and influence building. OpenAI doesn't want to be captive to one silicon vendor and one cloud provider only. By spreading contract across NVIDIA, AMD, Oracle, and Microsoft, it ensures a few things. One is multiple source of GPU. Second of all is political leverage. We are everyone's partner, not anyone's child. So after all, and lastly, redundancy in infrastructure as demand scale unpredictably. It is the digital version of supply chain hedging. If one partner stumble, like Oracle margin scale for example, the ecosystem still feeds itself. 3. Why it puzzle market? Why this circular setup puzzle the market? Market prefer linear supply chain. Chip vendor to cloud provider to AI company and then to enterprise customer. OpenAI has turned that into a network graphs. So analysts can't easily model who earns what margins. When Oracle loses money renting GPU, but Microsoft gain from OpenAI API usage, traditional valuation framework short circuit. So it's very difficult to do a valuation to this type of circular framework, I would say. It's also a very important cultural change. NVIDIA both supplies and competes via DGX Cloud. Microsoft both owns and rents Oracle both sells and subsidizes. Investors see that as and ask, who is the real profit center of all of that? 4. The likely outcome. The circularity will eventually collapse inwards toward vertical integration. OpenAI, Microsoft, and their closest hardware alliance will consolidate into self-sufficient AI stack, each with its own silicon, training cluster, and enterprise channel. Until then, the circular contract creates a temporary feedback loop of capital and hype, keeping everyone funded while the technology matures. So, instinctively, you would say, maybe this is a scam, this is not efficient, this is real. They are trying to feed each other to actually inflate their revenue or their profitability or whatsoever. So it seems very puzzling at first, but it's puzzling because it's look economically inefficient. But strategically, it is how OpenAI keeps the entire AI industrial base orbiting around itself. Everyone thinks they are supplying OpenAI, but OpenAI is quietly orchestrating them, and that's strategically very efficient. So now the quick question is that obviously a lot of people are saying, hey, how come a 500 billion company like OpenAI can afford all this chip buying and so on and so on? So let's actually get into that right now. That's the million-dollar question, or rather multi-billion-dollar question. It goes right to the strange economic and current AI boom. OpenAI isn't really buying chips in the same way a normal customer buys hardware. It is engineering a kind of financial flywheel where capital, compute, and credits keeps recycling through its partners. So let's break down the mechanism done in plain language. They don't buy the chips, they lease the capacity. Most of the GPU clusters associated with OpenAI are owned and financed by the cloud. Microsoft, Oracle, and soon possibly AWS. They all purchase the hardware from NVIDIA or AMD, install it in the data center, and give OpenAI reserved access. OpenAI then pays through long-term services contract or revenue sharing deal. That means OpenAI capex really in reality is minimal. The hyperscaler shoulder the debt and the depreciation of the asset. Second of all, Microsoft money is effectively a line of credit. Microsoft 13 billion multi-stage investment wasn't a cash pile sitting in OpenAI bank. It was mostly compute credits and infrastructure commitment, Microsoft buying the chip, building the cluster, and letting OpenAI use them in exchange for revenue participation. So when you hear OpenAI is buying billions of GPU, read it as Microsoft is financing billion in GPU for OpenAI workloads. Third, revenue pre-sales and model licensing keep the flywheel spinning. Enterprises and API clients like Salesforce, Stripe, Canva, etc. prepay or commit to usage tier of GPT-4 and 5. That cash feeds straight back into the compute budget. Essentially, the user of the model are paying for the chip that trained the model that they now use, a self-funding loop. Fourth, equity value as collateral. OpenAI valuation now worth, I think it's more like 500 billion in secondary market, give it enormous balance sheet leverage. It can negotiate chip supply and cloud capacity by pledging future revenue, model IP, or even token equity tranches. Suppliers accept those terms because demand for frontier model is exploding and nobody wants to be excluded from the ecosystem. So the hidden subsidy. Everyone wants to stay in the orbit of OpenAI. NVIDIA, AMD, Microsoft, Oracle, they are all partially subsidizing OpenAI because OpenAI is the brand anchor of the entire AI economy. If you supply it, you validate your hardware. If you host it, you attract other AI tenants. So OpenAI sits at the center of a quasi-public-private consumption where costs are diffused across the network in exchange for strategic relevance. So how can OpenAI afford all these chips? Strictly speaking, it cannot afford all these chips on its own. It survives by orchestrating a computational credit system. Microsoft fronts the capex, hyperscalers lend the capacity, and partners absorb the margin strain, and OpenAI monetize the output fast enough to keep the wheel turning. It is a kind of AI-era mercantilism, where compute is the currency, and everyone extends credits to the player that drives the global demand. But okay, I understand all this, like you're going to tell me. But OpenAI also is building its own supercenter. So how they can afford to build all this supercenter that they are building right now? So exactly, you are right. OpenAI has started building its own physical infrastructure. So not only letting others build infrastructure and they're renting the space to actually sell it to their own clients and then feedback, like we've just explained, the loop. Now OpenAI wants to build its own infrastructure, what insiders call frontier cluster or supercenters. These are massive GPU farms under its direct operational control, separate from Microsoft Azure footprint. Actually, this is about the deal that AMD just signed right now. Is to actually supply this 6 gigawatt of platform, whatever it means. At first glance, it seems contradictory. Why build your own when Microsoft already bankrolled your compute? But there is a deep strategic logic behind it. First of all, they have hit the limit of outsourcing. Training a model like GPT-5 or its successor requires coordination across hundreds of thousands of GPU, with low latency interconnect and custom cooling. Cloud providers, even Microsoft, have to serve multiple tenants on the platform. They can't rewire the data center entirely around OpenAI batch training job. But building its own supercenter, OpenAI guarantees dedicated, continuous compute, not scheduling bottleneck, no noise neighbors, no virtualization overhead. Think of it as owning your own airport instead of renting terminal gates. Second of all, funding comes structured partnership. Even the self-owned supercenter aren't financed directly by OpenAI cash alone. Industry chatters say they are using project finance structure, joint venture with real estate investor, energy utilities, and equipment vendor. OpenAI provide the technical spec, GPU orders, and long-term workload commitment. The partners funds and own the physical plants, earning back through capacity leases. It is the same playbook data center real estate investment trusts use, but branded OpenAI. So OpenAI gets dedicated compute without paying full capex. Again, orchestration rather than ownership. They are securing the bottleneck. The real scarcity isn't just GPU, it is power delivery. Hundreds of megawatts per site is needed to power all this GPU. Advanced cooling system, and ultra-fast fiber optic connections. By reserving and developing those directly, OpenAI ensure that when the next generation of model is ready, they are not waiting in line behind Amazon, Google, or Meta for physical infrastructure. It is the same logic SpaceX use with Launchpad. Control the bottleneck, control the cadence of innovation. Fourth, strategic independence from Microsoft. As long as OpenAI relies entirely on Azure, its negotiating leverage is limited. Owning physical capacity, even partially, gives it a credible outsized option. That doesn't mean they are turning on Microsoft at all. It means they are balancing the relationship. Think of it as OpenAI creating strategic ambiguity so that no single partner can dictate pricing or access term for frontier compute. 5. The metagame. Becoming an infrastructure company. If these supercenters succeed, OpenAI morph from an AI lab into a vertically integrated AI utility, building, owning, and operating the infrastructure that power its own and others' model. At that point, it competes not just with Anthropic or Mistral, but with Microsoft Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud themselves. An extraordinary power shift for OpenAI. So yes, OpenAI's new supercenter program looks extravagant on paper, but it's actually a control move. They are looking down the one-scale resources that defines the next decade of AI, compute density tied to power. What looks like an overreach might be the only way to stay ahead once everyone else catching up. So now you are asking, why is only OpenAI doing this deal with these big providers and not other providers, not other players? So because the answer is very simple. Because OpenAI sits in a very rare, almost imperial position inside the AI ecosystem. And it's the only player that can credibly turn demand into geopolitical leverage. So let's unpack why no one else can play this game at that scale than OpenAI. First of all, it commands the crown jewel model. OpenAI owns the world's most commercially successful foundation model, GPT-4, GPT-4 Turbo, and soon GPT-5, with unmatched user adoptions. That gives it something no one else truly has, guaranteed compute demand. Every new version requires tens of thousands of GPU for training and generates hundreds of millions of dollars in API usage on release. When you control both sides of that equation, supply need and monetization, you can go to Oracle, Microsoft, or AMD and say, build around us and we will fill your capacity. Do you understand? Build around us and we will fill your capacity. Nobody else can offer that certainty of revenue for these suppliers. It is structurally subsidized by Microsoft. No other AI lab has a backer that large as Microsoft, that desperate to stay relevant, and that's willing to fund loss-making infrastructure. It is so big, they can just afford it. Anthropic, of course, has Amazon and Google, but they compete with each other. Stability is limited. Meta and Google beat their own system. OpenAI alone has a quasi-exclusive financier who needs the success for Azure to stay in the AI race. That means access to tens of billions in credits, energy deals, and cheap supply without taking dilution or debt. Third of all, it becomes the narrative benchmark. OpenAI is to AI what Apple was to the smartphone era, the reference product that everyone else measures against. That status makes every supplier, investor, and government want a foot in the door. Partnering with OpenAI isn't just commercial, it is signaling. Oracle, entire pitch to investor, we are hosting OpenAI workload. Is worth billions in market cap alone, even if margins are slim. And we've seen, Oracle stock actually just rocketed on the news that it's partnering with OpenAI. That's why OpenAI can negotiate sweetheart deals and other treats access to its demand as marketing expense. Fourth, regulatory optics and neutrality. Because OpenAI is technically a capped profit entity and brand itself as safety-first research lab, government and hyperscalers view it as less threatening than, say, Google DeepMind or Meta. That makes it easier for them to cooperate across borders and sectors. It is not seen as a competitor eating everyone's lunch, it's seen as an ecosystem catalyst. That's politically priceless. Timing and first mover advantage. Training GPT-3 early, when GPU were cheap and available, gave OpenAI a massive compute debt advantage. It's already built the training infrastructure, dataset, and pipeline when no one else could get allocation. And by the time others tried to scale, OpenAI was already negotiating at the manufacturing layers, cutting deals directly with chip suppliers, not just cloud computers. Everyone else is still catching their breath. Anthropic is scaling, but its models are smaller and its revenue base are thinner. Mistral, XAI, or Courier are still boutique in the AI game. Even Google and Meta, for enormous, are focused inwards, using AI to reinforce the core business, not leasing compute externally. OpenAI, in contrast, turned itself into an AI utility with global clients and cross-industry contracts. So the short answer is OpenAI can make those billion-dollar deals because it is the gravitational center of the AI universe. It generates enough demand, prestige, and strategic importance that suppliers compete to underwrite its cost. Everyone else is still orbiting that mass until someone builds a model that can pull comparable gravitational force. OpenAI will remain the only entity able to command global capital and infrastructure on that scale. And I hope now you understand why all this deal is only around OpenAI and not other players. And actually it gives you more confidence about the circularity of these deals and why they are doing all this. And despite all the worries around, OpenAI cannot afford this is all a scam, they are feeding each other and so on, and this is all going to collapse. No, this is not true. And I hope that today's video make you confidence again that this is all a new strategic game that they are playing. And because this is new, nobody knows exactly how to value these type of strategical games. And only the future will tell whether or not this was the right things to do. But this is not a scam. There's nothing about scam in that. So don't listen to what other YouTubers or what you are listening online. Nothing scam, nothing illegal. This is all smart strategical move for OpenAI and other players to feed each other revenue and to make sure that all these revenue are predictable and easy to get. Okay? So thanks so much for watching. If you like it, like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks, bye.